Good afternoon. Come on, you gotta have a little more energy than that. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Wonderful. You ate that wonderful lunch. I know you're all pumped up and ready to go. Hey, we're on the downside. After this, you go home, right? Absolutely. But this is probably, from my perspective, the most important information you're going to hear today. Information that is very relevant to probably each and every one of us in here to some degree or another. And I think if you keep your antennas up, you're going to walk away with something that you can go and put into practice and make a difference with. Is that okay? We have a distinguished panel up here. These guys have a plethora of information, knowledge, experience. You know, we want to afford you some time to tap into them to pull out some of that information, knowledge, and experience that you probably in need of and put it into practice for yourselves. My name is Sammy Lewis. I'm the mental health coach and the co-facilitator of the domestic violence prevention via the faith community. Y'all know about that? Yes, it's a good thing. It's a good thing. It's good work that we're doing. My cohort here is right here with me today, and this team here, we're doing some wonderful work. Really trying to make a difference as it relates to domestic violence, intimate partner violence. I just saw something on the news the other day. It was elderly violence. Did y'all see that? Elderly violence. You know, and so violence in any shape or form needs to be addressed. It needs to be eradicated. That's really what needs to happen. And so we want to equip you today with some information that will help you to that end. Do you all know about the CEUs? Yes, sir. Everybody know what to do? Yes. Everybody know how to do? Everybody will do. Okay, wonderful. So at the end, we're going to make sure that you check out with, see that young lady right there? We're going to let you check out with her so you can get your credit for your CEUs. But you must remain in the session for the entire duration. You must have a sign-in with the proctor. Who's the proctor? You have a proctor here today? Right at the door. Okay. You must obtain an evaluation form from the proctor prior to the start of the session. Did you get your evaluation forms? Everybody? Good. Attend. At the end of the session, you will need to check back with the proctor and turn in your completed evaluation to receive your certificate. Everybody good? Any other questions about CEUs? No? Wonderful. Well, let's get right to it. By way of introduction, to introduce this distinguished panel to you today. Again, these are people who have a vast amount of experience. I've not had the opportunity to know them very long, but the short time that I have known them, I'm telling you, these are the right people to have on this panel to talk about this subject that we're going to be talking about today. Our first panelist is Marta, Crader.
Go for it.
Pelaez. Okay, she's the president and CEO of Family Violence Prevention Services, a San Antonio-based nonprofit established in 1977 to provide the tools toward the self-sufficiency of victims of domestic violence. The organization began as an emergency shelter for women and children. It now offers a comprehensive array of residential and non-residential programs and services to help individuals and families recover from the pain and long-term effects of abuse. Marta has a master's degree in clinical psychology and has dedicated more than 2 decades of professional service to vulnerable populations, mostly children. In collaboration with local schools and universities, she helped create educational programs to advance the victim's self-sufficiency. She has worked with judicial and protective systems to break through traditional siloed approaches to social services. Marta is a frequent contributor to the local and national media. She was a guest of Bill Moyer's PBS documentary, The Journal. She is Marta is the board chair of Texas Council of Family Violence and 2-term past chair. She currently serves as a member of the P.E.A.C.E. Public Policy Committee, the Allocation Committee, and a Region 5 Area Director. So she has a lot of skills, a lot of stuff in the toolkit. So please tap into Marta today as we move forward. Next, we have Captain Rene
Gallegos.
Gallegos. All right, Captain Rene Gallegos is a native of San Antonio, grew up in the south side of San Antonio. He graduated in 1988 from Harlandale High School and entered the military service and served in the United States Army as a combat medic with the 1st Infantry Division in Fort Riley, Kansas. So somebody said, who was born? I won't hold him against him. I was in the Air Force. It's all good. He entered law. Gonna be real nice for that. Gotcha. He entered the law enforcement in 1994 as a cadet in the San Antonio Police Academy as a proud member. I wonder what is this? The 94B. What is that?
That's our class, 94B, 94 Bravo.
94 Bravo. Gotcha. He has been serving San Antonio as a police officer for 28 years. And he was promoted to detective in 2002 and was assigned to the Special Units, Victims Units, which investigates sex crimes, human trafficking, family violence, and child abuse. Rene holds an associate, bachelor's, and master's degree in criminal justice from Wayland Baptist. Okay. He also holds a master's peace officer license in Texas. Rene also attended the FBI Command College in 2016 and IACP Leadership and Police Organization in 2019. Give it up for Rene. And now, everybody knows this lady, Patricia S. Castillo, has worked for 43 years in end violence against women and children and is co-founder and executive director of the P.E.A.C.E initiative, putting an end to abuse through community efforts from 1990 to the present. Originally a coalition of 48 agencies and organizations and individuals, she developed domestic violence community projects and public policy through collaboration and community organizing. She serves as an advocate, educator, and technical assistant resource to the civic, legal, medical, religious, educational, human resource, and media. She is an active community coalition and networks. And I do not have a bio of he told me just call him the DA. I don't have his bio, so he's going to tell you a little bit about himself.
Well, good afternoon, and the reason he doesn't have his bio is I literally was asked 2 hours ago to step in and fill in. But I will tell you that whenever these ladies call, I drop what I'm doing because that's how important they are to this community, and that's the dedication that we should all have to fighting domestic violence. Let me just tell you a little bit about myself. I've been an attorney for close to 35 years, over 34 years. I received my B.A. and JD from St. Mary's University, so any of you are rattlers, that's where I went to school. And I grew up in this community. I grew up on the deep west side, right across from Castillo High School. I remember seeing domestic violence growing up. I remember seeing my stepfather abusing my mother, thinking that was just the way it was supposed to be. And you know, it didn't take until I didn't realize until I got to college that that's not the way it's supposed to be. You're not supposed to grow up thinking that that's acceptable behavior. And in the 34 years that I've been a lawyer, I started as a young prosecutor years ago. It's always been a challenge to prosecute these kinds of cases because there are many reasons why it's difficult to get witnesses and complainants into court. Primarily, sometimes it's because the victims of domestic violence are coerced or threatened by their abusers, right? If you come to court and testify against me, I'm going to go to jail, you're going to lose your house, you're going to lose the ability to eat, and the kids are not going to be able to go to school. So when I first ran for DA, I realized that not enough emphasis was place on domestic violence. So when I came into the office, January 2019, we refocused that division. We pulled it out of another section. We doubled the number of prosecutors and investigators and advocates. And now that is the number one priority in our office is to combat domestic violence. And together, I believe that we're making a difference here in Barrett County. So thank you very much for inviting us.
We have some questions, so as to move the meeting along, our time together. But at the end, I want to give you the opportunity as well to ask any pertinent questions you may have based on information that you have shared by this panel. So if you need clarification or there's just other questions that you need answers to, they would be more than happy to provide those answers for you. Okay? All right, so the first question is, what is the greatest challenge victims of violence face leaving their abuser? That's to the panel.
As horrific and demeaning the situation may be at home, that victim is even more terrorized of leaving. And it is quite a frequent story. People even wanting to help or thinking that they're helpful, they will ask a victim, why don't you leave him? I mean, why are you waiting? She is more terrified of leaving than she is of staying. Several reasons. Number one, he has been threatening her not to leave. If you leave, I'm going to take the children, you're going to be deported, or I'm going to keep the children, you're going to see them again. If you leave, I'm going to do this and that to your mother, to your family members. I'm going to kill you. And she is the one who is prepared to leave because he's made good on those threats. So those are some of the reasons why women do not leave. So I would ask if you're ever in a position of helping someone, that is one thing that perhaps you should never ask a victim of domestic violence. Why don't you just put yourself, not victims, in her shoes? What do you think you're going to do? Just take your 5 children and leave where? To do what? Well, there's someone watching your living in a short.
They also don't leave because they don't have anywhere to go. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but you know it's very expensive to rent a house or an apartment in San Antonio now. You have to pay for childcare, and it's per child, right? Hundreds of dollars per child. So if you have to work, who's going to take care of the children while you work? As far as I know, in terms of free child care that our city offers, there's waiting lists for that. There's also waiting lists for public housing. And so those are just a couple of the things that a survivor has to think about in terms of, you know, picking up and going. They also have to, first and foremost, think of their safety and their children's safety. And so safety planning is the first thing that we talk about with them in terms of leaving is how are you going to stay safe? If you leave, how are you going to stay safe? What is it that you're going to have to do to stay safe? And, you know, we really have to think about their safety first and foremost because their chances of being killed, murdered, or seriously injured increases by 75% when they're in the process of leaving. And a lot of people don't realize that your chances of dying or being seriously injured increase that much when you're in the process of leaving. And all you gotta do is watch TV or hear the media, you know, and when somebody does get seriously injured or murdered, the media will often say they were in the process of leaving. They were in the process of filing for divorce. They were in the process of applying for a protective order. They were in the process of pressing charges. And it's during those times that the person is most at risk, okay? So when we say things to a survivor like, hurry up and get out, you could very well be telling them, hurry up and be murdered, okay? So we can't say that anymore. We have to say, how can I help? What would be helpful to you? What can I do to be of help? Okay? That's the kind of statements they need to hear from somebody. And the other thing that's so important is that we not judge them. So many people judge a survivor of domestic violence. And that judgment is also what keeps somebody trapped. And so we really have to shift our way of thinking when we think about domestic violence. It can no longer be, why does she just stay? The question has to be, what is it about my community that helps keep her trapped in that relationship? And then together we can work on eliminating those barriers and those things that are about entrapment in a situation of abuse and violence.
Go ahead.
For law enforcement, the one thing we do see is that, and the stats will tell you, is that before somebody, a victim of domestic violence, calls the police, it happened multiple times. I'm not in this moment and decided to call. Usually you've been in that moment multiple times before you decide to pick up the phone and dial 911. And even when the officers get there, even then, we're trying to do a victim-centered type of interview to be able to extract that information and be able to prove the case. We want to file a charge and we want him to answer for the case. But just understand that everybody in this room has a role to play. We're all connected to people. And it starts with just the people around you. I always say that your family is your first ministry, right? It is where you can touch many people. You touch somebody, they touch somebody. It's to provide the support, and it's wonderful that you're hearing today of how would you approach that victim? How would you talk to them? How do you get them? It's the support and not to blame, because we will come in, and when we come in, we're, along with our DA's office, we want to prosecute these cases. And you call, we're coming. And once we get there, we hear a story, we don't turn back. We go forward as a law enforcement agency. Especially if you have injuries, you tell me your story, we're going to go forward. But just understand, before they call the first time, it's happened multiple times. And so they just had the courage in that moment to call 911.
Thank you very much. I was just going to say, on top of all of the reasons that you heard today, why she should not be judged, she should not be asked why you do. It may also be because that support system that should exist maybe is not there. Maybe the family has not been there for her. Maybe the friends have failed to understand what she's going through. Maybe she hasn't told them. So that is another reason why expecting her to be from one minute to the next is not only the most dangerous thing for her, but it's also something that we should not protect her father to listen and to say yes, because he said, I'm here. Even if she says, I don't want to, as expected. Okay, I'm here. She needs to know that there is someone that she can call.
What the other three panelists had already told you, I absolutely concur with. The challenge for me is to come up with another reason that I can convey to you about why it would be a challenge to you. And I will say this, that sure, the inability to have options is one reason it's difficult to leave. Sure, the fear of how it impacts not only the abused and the children and everybody else in the household would be another reason. But we often talk about the psychology of the abuser. We need to be mindful of the psychology and the mindset of the abused. Because what Marta just mentioned, we have a term for that in our office. We call that victim shaming, victim blaming. We do not engage in victim shaming. In fact, I'll share a story. About a month ago, I heard one of our young prosecutors did just that. Marked him up into our office, and the next day he was gone. Because we will not tolerate that. It's hard enough for victims of domestic violence to have the courage to call the police, to have the courage to come to these agencies. And then, if we're lucky enough to get them into our office, we don't need to make them feel like it's their fault. Where I'm headed with this is sometimes I will offer that the victim herself believes that she did something wrong. And I didn't make him, enough to eat. I didn't make him his favorite meal. We're all adults here. I didn't do well in the bedroom. And so because of that, it's my fault that he assaulted me. That's not true. We need to be able to teach our victims it's not their fault. And I think that's sometimes the reason that it's a challenge for all of us to prosecute these cases, because maybe they grew up believing that. Maybe they grew up believing that their job was to act or perform a certain way. Everyone here needs to embolden women, and especially younger ladies that see this as they're growing up, that they need to be strong enough to be able to say, no, I'm my own person, I'm going to complain when something goes wrong.
Thank you. Yes.
Let me answer that, and pass it back down. Just by a show of hands, how many of you here live in the San Antonio-Garrett County area? Okay, most of you. One of the things that we did to improve the way we run the office is we improved our protective order unit that's run by the Family Justice Center. The year before I was elected, there were only 300 protective order applications that were submitted to the protective order unit. The next year, there were 1,000. The next year, 1,200. We're up to 1,500 now. We need to encourage everybody to file a protective order as soon as possible, because what we can do is we can go into court, we can ask a civil judge to issue a protective order requiring that person stay away from the victim. And if he comes back and has any contact, then we have a tool now. It's a criminal case. We can file called violation of a protective order. We can arrest that individual, we can put him back in jail, and charge him with a new crime. So that is one tool that we're using. We've also improved the way someone can file a protective order. They can do it online now instead of having to come to the office. But I absolutely agree with you. We need to empower them. We need to provide them with wraparound services. At the Family Justice Center, there are wraparound services that people can take advantage of, just like there are services that are provided here at this table.
And also what they don't know, knowledge is power.
Absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
Another thing when we're talking about protective orders.
Did you get was that a good answer for you?
Yes, not about the show.
Yes,
How much time they have to be in the shelter to be protected?
Absolutely. So let me start by saying that not everybody calls the police. The police is ready to help. However, because experiences that they may have had with the police, expectations that they may have had of that encounter with the police, or because things that the abuser is telling them. You call the police and I'm gonna tell them that you have a warrant for your arrest because you have all these traffic tickets that you haven't paid. Or you call the police, and the police is gonna take you because you're not documented, you're not properly documented, you're illegal. That's when the children threat comes to life. So not everybody calls the police. So as awful as the numbers about the incidence of domestic violence in our community are, they're even higher because those numbers that are tabulated are part of analytics based on the number of people that call the police. As they say, some people call us directly at the shelter. Some people call United Way. Some people call Patricia. And those phone calls are not part of the number that police has. So remember that. About how to get to the shelter, I can give you the hotline number right now. It is on our website, Battered Women and Children's Shelter, 210-733-8810 is open 24 hours a day, all days and nights of the year. We didn't close 1 hour during the past 2.5 years of COVID. We don't close during holidays, Christmas, New Year. In fact, during those days is when we are the busiest. Okay, so you call us as a victim. You call us. There are a series of questions because we want to make sure that you are appropriate for shelter. We want to know the immediacy of your need. So there are a series of questions that are asked, and based on those questions, you are asked to come in. If you're driving yourself, if you have your own car, which is not necessarily the majority, because the majority are transported by the police to the shelter, we will ask them to drive yourself to the closest police station, and the police will escort you. Why? Because many times they have been followed by the abuser. They are tracking her through the cell, through the car, things that they put in the car, and they are tracked. GPS. So if she doesn't go to the police station, we ask them to go to a certain place, stay there where we know they're going to be safe, and there is a queue, is that it's hamburger place? Quick trip, who is in the process of arranging for a room where victims of domestic violence in need can go to, and they will be cared for. They will be in the company of someone until further directions are given to them.
It's a sanctuary. Those new gas stations that are QT, they're a sanctuary.
And there, when we feel they're okay, and the police is ready to escort them, then they're brought into the shelter. Did I answer your question? Yes.
To be accepted, is it like anything, like can you just like, when you drive yourself over there, because I've seen the battered women shelter, can you just go over there and just ask, of course, what, counseling, well, they'll counsel you, right, get the statements, and you're gonna go through a process. Is it right then and there where you receive the services where they actually put you in a safe spot, or do they deny you, or like, are they turning away, or how does that work?
You may be referring to non-residential services. We have non-residential services at 7911 Broad. Is a 3-story building where we have counseling services for adults, including men, and children, and other programs, parenting, support groups, etc. So that is non-residential. For residential services, that is the Battered Women and Children's Shelter, again, the process is you can call us and we will take it from there.
What if a client isn't ready to make a police report? Is it ready to make that contact with police? But we know that they need a safe place that children should go to. What's that process in regards to that?
A police report is never a condition to come to the shelter. The only condition to come to the shelter is that you are a victim of domestic violence and that you are seeking safety for you and for your child. That's it. No one who is appropriate for shelter, and I'm telling you this, everybody here, this is my testimony. No one will be turned away. Anyone who is appropriate, no one will be turned away. And you would espouse the same philosophy that I do when I declare this. No one will be turned away. Because if I turn someone away who is in need of our services, and she happens to be murdered that night, I will be looking that face tomorrow in the Express News, and I cannot live with that. Just thinking about that makes me just feel very, very bad.
One more question, Patricia.
So what about battered men? Do they have a space? And then what about pets? Because often abusers will threaten the pets.
Absolutely. We have been sheltering pets. We have our own pet shelters. Ever since the legislature approved pets to be included in protective orders. So that to us was our marching orders to build a pet shelter. Today, I believe this morning, someone was asking that question, and we took them. We have 8 puppies, I believe 2 cats, that are housed at the pet shelter. And you asked another question.
About battered men.
About men. We do shelter men as well. We always have. I know the name of the shelter is deceiving because it is battered women and children. It should be adults and children. And I'm thinking about that. So yes, not in the same place. They're not housed alongside in the same dormitory section with the women, but we provide them the very, very same level of services that we provide the women. And some of them come with their children.
Ma'am.
So I'm 46, right, and always with my back, so my teacher from the age of 15, I was 30, right? And he never put his hands on me, he never talked at home about what his abuse looked like, right? But because he was providing for me, he was a father, the narcissist part of him was never spoken about, was never documented, right? But at the age of 30, when I left, I almost died. He almost killed me. He didn't succeed because he got tired of his sleep, right? And when I tell you that we came a long way, we came a long way. And 15 years ago, there was nothing, right? And it just brings me joy to know that you guys are here and that we're having this conversation and that we know that abuse is not just physical, right? Because he never put his hands on me before he almost tried to kill me, but he would say, "You leave me, the kids are gone," right? Or he would drive back to stay with my kids with me when I was taking the steps, right? So it just brings me joy that, hey, we're here and we're talking about it, and that abuse goes more than just physical. I just want to share that, and we came a long way.
That's an excellent lead to our second question. Some of the reasons that those who are being abused, what are some of the reasons that they found that we?
Well, those could be numerous, right? Somebody finally leaves because the violence reaches the children. You know, oftentimes the victims will say things like, "You can hit me, you can pound on me, you can sexually assault me, you can do whatever you want with me, but don't touch my kids," right? And so when the violence reaches the children, that's often, you know, something that motivates the victim to take steps, right? Again, but it's got to be, you know, safe for them to take those steps. The other thing is having a supportive system. Somebody telling them, you know, if you want to take those steps, I'll be there for you, I'll help you, I'll give you a ride to the district attorney's office, I'll, you know, having a support system. You know, oftentimes what people don't realize is that victims will tell family, friends, co-workers, fellow church members, comadres, tias, grandmas, they'll tell somebody close to them first before they tell any of us that they're being victimized or abused. And so that's why it's imperative for our city to be there when somebody close to us discloses and says, I need help. And that's why you need to be an educated citizenry. That's why it's so important for you guys to know about this stuff and learn about this stuff as much as you can, so that if and when somebody close to you tells you that this is happening to them, you know what to say. You know how to respond. You know how to help them access those resources. You know who to call. I can't tell you how many times people would call my office and say, I don't know who to call. I don't even know how to talk about this. And shame is a huge factor that keeps people trapped in situations of abuse and violence. They're very embarrassed that this is happening to them. They think they're the cause of what is happening to them. They think they brought it upon themselves. And they think that they believe the lies that have been told to them. Like that you're worthless, that you're ugly, that you're fat, that nobody's gonna want you with my 3 kids, that, you know, this, I mean, all of these horrible things that get said to them have embedded in the way that they view themselves. And so our job is to get beyond that, right? And say, nobody deserves to treat you this way. Nobody has a right to treat you this way, and nobody deserves to be treated this way. No matter what you did, no matter what you said, no matter how you acted, no matter how you look, it doesn't matter. None of those things matter. Nobody has a right to put their hands on you and to psychologically abuse you, like, you know, the young woman in the back was talking about being psychologically, emotionally, and verbally abused. People can destroy you without putting a finger on it. Okay? And so we have to remember that. We have to remember that and be there for them when they finally say, who do I call? What do I say? You know, what do I ask for? You know, what is available? You know, like people, I remember in the early days, Marta, they used to call us homewreckers and, you know, and man-haters. Man-haters, and that, you know, we were there, we're going to destroy the institution of the family. You know, they say all these horrible things about us, right? But the truth is that, you know, we don't tell survivors what to do. We tell them what their options are. Okay? We tell them, you can do this, you can do that, you can go here, you can ask for this, these are your options. But they guide us. They're the experts in their lives. They're the ones that tell us what they want, what they need, where they want to go, what they, you know, are looking for. And so our job then is to, based on what they tell us, then we provide, okay, this and this and this is what your options are. And this and this and this is what you can do. And this and this and this is where you can call. All right? But it's not our job to tell them what to do, ever, ever. They already have somebody who tells them what to do. Who's that? The person who's abusive towards them. Okay? And so that's why that's not our job. All right? The other thing I want to say that's very important is that, and for the person who uses violence, if you guys know of somebody who uses violence against their partner, and you know that you can talk to that person, it would be priceless if you could say, you know what, I love you very much, I care about what happens to you, but what's going on between you and your partner is unacceptable. You really need to get some help for what is going on. You really, you know, need to find some help for yourself, because, you know, ultimately you could kill your partner, you're hurting your children by doing this violence in the presence of your children, you're traumatizing them. You know, and if you're somebody who that person looks up to, somebody who that person respects, somebody who that person trusts, feels comfortable with, they're gonna listen to you and they're gonna go seek that help. So, stick your neck out a little bit and take that risk and say, your behavior is not acceptable. You're damaging, the relationship that should be the most sacred in your life, which is with your partner and with your families. And so I would like to encourage you to be willing to talk to somebody who uses violence. And not only that, that would help keep them out of the criminal justice system if they get the help. Because throwing people in jail and throwing away the key, that don't fix nothing. Okay, they come out worse. All right? And so if we can figure out a way to keep them from falling into that criminal justice system black hole, that would be the best thing we can do. We take that humane approach, right, of working with all members of our community and all members of that family.
And also, I'm sorry. Also the fact that you noticed something. That is going to be priceless. Somebody else noticed. This wasn't just for the victim. Somebody else noticed. Joe, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Going back to the original question of what are some of the reasons that someone finally would leave, I would hope that what it is the realization that victim doesn't have to put up with that. That victim does not have to tolerate that behavior. Another way to describe it is that person has been emboldened and empowered into making that step. I'll tell you how we see it in the criminal justice system. We see it in terms of what a successful prosecution looks like. And a successful prosecution doesn't always look like what Patricia said, prison or jail, because I guarantee that does not fix the problem. For someone that is prosecuted for law office, one of our prosecutors that gets a jail, let's say a maximum jail of a year in jail, he's going to get time served when he's sitting in jail. He might even, if he behaves, get trustee time, which means he's going to get 3 times credit, which means he's going to be out in 3 or 4 months. What's going to happen when he gets out in 4 months? What kind of an attitude, what kind of a demeanor do you think he's going to have when he goes back home? Is he going to be happy with the person that put him in jail? Of course not. He's going to be angry. He's going to take it back. He's going to take it out on his abuser. He may even take it out on his kids. And, well, definitely, on his victim. So we've got to do something different, and that's why sometimes successful prosecution, sometimes the goal should be successful supervision, participation in the BIP program, the Batterers Intervention Program, so that he can understand, that he's doing wrong, that he's committing a crime. There are other alternatives to engaging in that behavior, and a lot of these cases have mental health components, they have substance abuse components, some of them just have anger management components. But I think the goal is to try and successfully resolve that case if we can, and if we can't. And this is the kind of individual that no matter what you do for him, he's going to continue to abuse her, he's going to continue to commit this crime. Maybe at that point, then the victim or complainant finally says, you know what, yeah, I'm done, I'm out of here. You're not going to change, so I need to move on.
I just want to kind of reiterate, I provide domestic violence classes for victims and perpetrators. And one of the things when we're doing the assessment, it's crazy to hear, trying to be non-judgmental and open and allowing our clients to kind of reach that point in their life where they have those aha moments and kind of going over those tactics and say, and having that realization, hey, just because you weren't physically abused does not mean you're not going through domestic violence. I mean, it's something I just kind of fell into because my primary job is working with juveniles. And so when I started doing this, it's actually been an amazing experience for me. Not only working with the victims, but also working with perpetrators. Because a lot of times, it's a lot of behaviors that have become normalized in their lives. And And when you start kind of saying, hey, this is not healthy, this is not okay, even with the perpetrators, sometimes you'll see these aha moments. And it's staying non-judgmental, and when they kind of start doing that report, then they actually are able to receive that feedback. Because if not, I promise when I do my intake, they're like, I don't need this. I don't know why they're referring to me. I don't know why I have to go. Even my victims that have been severely, will be very shut off to the process. But once you start and having that openness and kind of saying, well, you're here to tell your story. Like, you can share it with everybody, or you can choose not to. It's up to you. It's been a very amazing experience for myself.
I'm glad you're doing it. Thank you. We need all the help we can get.
For those mothers and children who are accepted into the battered women's shelter, how long can they stay there, and what's the next course of action once they have to leave?
Thank you very much. So technically, because we have to speak in those terms too, funders will go with 90 days. 90 days. At the 91st day, it is supposed to have been resolved. The crisis is supposed to have been resolved. Really? Really? So it is from here to there. Let's take the case of a young woman who comes to the shelter. She was abused the one time by this boyfriend she was living with. She needs a protective order. She has managed to educate herself in domestic violence, and she also has some academic education. She has a few years of college to her name. She has a very healthy support system in, let's say, New York. So 4, perhaps 5 months later, after she has received some counseling, case management, her goals have been fulfilled, her protective order has been granted, she is ready to leave. And we provide her assistance. She goes to New York, and we never hear from her, or we may hear from her. That's one case. Compare that case with the case of a mother who arrived released from the hospital with her both hands heavily bandaged. She came with 2 of her 3 teenagers, expecting 6 months pregnant. She had been married to the same abuser for 18 years, and she had been saving coins and dollar bills through those years to put herself through cosmetology school. And on that Saturday, she was practicing cutting her neighbor's hair in her garage. But her abuser, her husband, turned around. This was the day she knew he would be gone for the entire day. He turned around for some reason and found her cutting someone's hair. Took her in and butchered her hands. 21 stab wounds in her hands, nerve damage. The oldest of the teenagers, the 17-year-old, was found later by the police. Found him emaciated, hiding behind the bushes, holding the same knife that the father had used because he wanted to wait for the father to come back, and he wanted to finish him. He wanted to kill him. So that case, and I apologize, it's difficult to understand why some of these awful things do happen, but they do. That case exemplifies everything that is domestic violence. The generational modeling that these people take as victims and as abusers, and how it is passed on to the next generation. It was the children who called the police. It was the children who called the ambulance and wrapped mom's hands in the sheets so she would bleed to death. That woman stayed with us for 2 years. Okay, so we offered her every program that we have, including housing. Ultimately, the story ends well. She recovered. She did not recover the full use of her hands, but she is working from time to time. She calls us. We know of the 2 younger teenagers. She lost the baby she was expecting shortly after she came to the shelter. But the oldest one, it's our understanding, is not doing too well. Okay? So again, as to how long do they stay is from here to there. Some women come and they stay just a few days. They still have the voice of the perpetrator in their head. If you leave, I am going to do X. And they are horrified. And they have to do it. Nationally, 28% of women who go to shelters go back to shelters 7 times before they sever the relationship. 7 times. That's how insidious and how damaging domestic violence is to the victim. That is the rate of recidivism at the shelter, and we define that we use that to define our rate of success, is 6.3. 6.3% of women who go through our emergency crisis program come back to shelter. 6.3%. Still too high.
What is our responsibility, or what obligation do we have to, or do y'all have, if we either witness or if violence is reported to us?
Are you addressing that to me? To
Well, for y'all as an agency, for us as individual people, for
Okay, what is the responsibility that we all have towards domestic violence? I very much welcome the question.
to report it?
To report it. There isn't anything official. It is not a legal obligation. And Joe, you will correct me if I am wrong. It does not exist, not in terms of domestic violence, unless you're talking about a minor. Okay, you're talking about a teen who's being abused. So that is it. It's not legal. It's a human responsibility, because that person that you have in front of you and you know is being abused may be killed.
Now, we've had multiple times where concerned people calling neighbors, they hear the yelling, they hear the screaming, or family members, hey, there's some text. At the very least, if you call us we call it a check the welfare. So you check on somebody for us. At the very least, we hope that our knock on the door will at least calm things down. With the hope that she opens it and she opens up. But at the very least, we can go by, we can check the welfare, make sure she's okay. Face-to-face contact is preferred to see if we see any injuries. We kind of look at the background. Are we looking for disturbed furniture? Did a disturbance happen? Was she crying? You can see the redness in the face. We're looking for multiple factors to be able, and the first thing we'll do is separate her. Hopefully she'll come out and separate from the perpetrator. Once she creates that separation, then we're open to talk about what happened. Obviously we need her to tell us her story, but we try to do different things to kind of separate them and try to see if we can get a story where we can come in and help. The department, you know, I know I said, hey, we take the bad guy to jail, but we have a lot of, every officer is trained on domestic violence. They're CIT trained with mental health. We go through a lot of training on domestic violence. We have now, for you guys that are not familiar, CRT is our crisis response team. They're at every substation in town. I work out of headquarters, out of the special victims unit, so we handle every felony case. But all the misdemeanor assaults will go to the substations. We have detectives, they work double shifts, they work weekends. Mental health is expanding their hours. They're the advocacy, crisis advocates that are working alongside our detectives at the substations. They're there, and we know exactly who to call, and they're sitting right here next to us. And we know who can help. We know. Give us an opportunity, and we can at least check on her to make sure she's okay. I know she touched on generational. That's really huge for us. We're seeing it. How many of us are grandparents in the room? You know, I have two, and the third one on the way, grandkid, right? And we didn't always were the greatest role model sometimes in our youth, right? We get that with age, and we get smarter and wiser. But we have an opportunity to change what we've shown our kids. Because my youngest is I only have one, I have 5 kids. I have 5 kids. And my youngest is a girl. And she's 10, right? And so, what am I teaching her? Does she have a role model in me as a father to see? If I was that role model that was an abuser, when she marries, she's going to say, this is okay. This is normal. My mom went through it, and she took it. She's good. And so those are the things we're modeling in these abusive relationships. The abuser on one side, on the males, and our daughters being to say it's okay to be abused. Those are the it's cultural on some of us, right? And generational, that we have to break. I've seen it on multiple generations doing this for 28 years. That's why we say it's one family at a time. It's that person right to you, the person you work with, right? We're reaching out to businesses. If they see it, they just don't know what to do with it. And that's where knowledge is power, right? We said that earlier. The more knowledge we can push out to you, to businesses, to anybody that will listen, to our faith community, the more we get the word that this is not okay. And that San Antonio is going to break this cultural and generational piece of domestic violence.
What the captain says, go ahead. What the captain says is very, very important, you guys, because as first responders, they're the ones that open the door to intervention, to comprehensive intervention. A lot of times, and I'm saying this because so many people say, I don't want to call the police because it's none of my business. I don't want to call the police because it's too scary. I don't want to call the police because whatever. But you need to call the police because they need to get those wheels turning in terms of the intervention. That's what opens the door to us being able to get to those families. Because if they remain hidden and isolated and unidentified, all you see is escalation and the passing on from one generation to the next. Yes, ma'am, in the back, in the way back.
Yeah, so I'm a 911 operator, so let me tell you, receiving those calls, be sure you're very clear on what you're saying. Don't I think, so if you saw your neighbor hit their partner, be very specific about that, because as a 911 operator dispatcher, I'm sending out officers into an incredibly dangerous situation where they can be seriously hurt until because the situations are so volatile. So make sure when you're calling it in, be very specific about what you saw or what you're suspecting of or what has been told to you.
And on the specifics, when you call in, we have a priority system on dispatch. If you're absolutely getting assaulted, make sure we say that, because that'll throw you to the top of the list. That's an assault in progress for us, right? Rather than a disturbance. So don't minimize what you're saying on the line with whoever you're talking to. Make sure you're honest as can be, or we can get there as quickly as possible.
I had a question about mental illness. There are a lot of families that are living where the mental illness is actually the perpetrator, and the families are living in fear of psychosis as violent, right? And I was wondering if you could add that dimension to consideration of the mental illness component of these violent situations. Is that clear?
It is not uncommon that a mentally ill person will come to the shelter having been abused herself or himself, who, because she no longer is able to have her medicine to treat her psychosis, will decompensate 2-3 days later. So mental health, the dual diagnosis, is very much present in what we do on a daily basis. So we immediately refer, we ask for help. We call UT Health, their psychiatric unit, and we take it from there. Sometimes it's
I don't think I was clear enough. There are many families who are, person is schizophrenic, person is paranoid, and the whole family just dampens and keeps that peace in prison. The violence,
There is, when we talked about knowledge is power, we have a new thing that with mental health where our counselors are going out with officers to be able to kind of handle it before it turns violent. And that's really the secret, is if it turns violent, we're coming, right? And counselors are not. But if you catch it before it turns violent, but you can see it coming, he's off his meds. We do have a mental health unit with the department. They go out with our mental health counselors to be able to address it before it becomes major behavioral issues, right? To be able to get him on his meds, right? And if needed, they'll work toward a mental health commitment through the courts. But even then, the family has to be really proactive to saying he absolutely needs the help. And so there is avenues. If you call PD, they go out with advocates through the mental health unit. It's new, it's expanding this year. We're hoping for it to grow a little bit more. We're not always the answer. And unfortunately, you know, when, even on a car accident reminder, everybody's dialing 911 and we're coming, right? We're trying to find other avenues, kind of like our DA said, we're trying to find other avenues to solve some of the crisis that has nothing to do with police officers in uniforms and guns. And so our mental health partners are in there. We're still there kind of on the backdrop, just in case, but we're letting them kind of handle it before it becomes violent.
I just wanted to say thank you. I love you, Ms. Patricia. Thank you all for having this kind of conversation because it is needed. The questions need to be addressed and answered properly instead of just assumed. I've been on a journey of survival from family violence for 43 years. I wasn't victimized first in my abuser's home, my husband. I was victimized in my mama's home at 9 years old by her ex-husband, and he knew about it. So he used that as an opportunity to do what you all teachers shaming. That you wasn't nothing, you was screwing your mama's husband when you was 9. Like, really, I was not. But he used that to terrify me, and it took 7 years of all of those beatings and trying to kill me, and he had learned behavior. He didn't always punch me where people could see it. He learned to do it in different ways. And I just now, 30 years later, after leaving him, was just diagnosed just 2.5 weeks ago with brain damage. From all of those beatings, from where he was punching me in the head.
Traumatic brain injury.
Yes.
A lot of battered women live with traumatic brain injury.
But I refuse to give up. I use all of that I went through to help someone else. We bring awareness, prevention, and intervention. Ms. Patricia has been a partner with me in the community for almost 15 years. So that we can keep bringing theatrical arts as a way to put it in your face that, hey, you don't have to take this. And then we bring the people with the knowledge and the resources to come. So that when you leave, you're not re-traumatized with no answers, right? Or those wounds are not reopened. It's important to make that call. Make those 911 calls with all the facts because that life that you may be saving may be the life you were used to seeing the day before passing by the door was saying hello or not. And then what happens when they're not there anymore? I can tell you, I'm a living testimony of what can happen when people stop talking. I just thank God there's someone in his family, not even on my side of the family, spoke up and got some help that day. And that's why I'm here. I had this young lady, I call her young lady, she's passed on now. I got to see her again all of those years later when I was 50. And I took Karen Chapter 16 back home to New Mexico and presented it at a teen center, and we found her. Because then, even in New Mexico, I did not want to do it without resources, and she joined us. And I was able to give her flowers all of those years later and tell her thank you, because I'll never forget. She said that she came with the officer, and she asked me, Karen, do you want your children? And I was scared. I was like, I do not hit my kids like that. They're all I got to take them. Do you realize that every time they see me get punched, they will punch them? And I left because I was scared for them, and I never went back. But it took 7 years of multiple officers come, me lying and telling them he really didn't hit me when my eye was so close, looked like I had a fight with Mike Tyson. Keep making the phone calls. Keep being brave enough to tell that abuser that it's not worth it to you or them, and you never know who's watching. These little ones who are growing up, that they become those offenders that they saw. I thought it was okay because I used to see my grandfather, who adored me, never hit us, but was okay with putting a gun to my grandmother's head, and I slept with her. And that's one of the worst memories I ever had of him, along with the best one. So keep making the reports. Thank you.
So we're kind of winding down. We have about 10 minutes left, roughly 10 minutes left. Has this been empowered? Information is power. It's definitely power. We'll take one more question. I have one more question that I want to ask Officer Capt here to expound upon a little bit. Matter of fact, if you go ahead, sir, right here.
Just about abusers. You said when he's going to send it to the jail, it's not good. When he get out, then he get worse. Is there any program, like health program, mental program, in the jail? If these people, if they not finish that program, they can get out?
We will begin, there was an interruption, we were doing it before COVID. We will begin in the coming weeks to implement the batteries intervention prevention program in the jail. It is a criminal justice department monitored and accredited. The criminal justice department is the accrediting institution of the program. Is a minimum of 24 weeks and a maximum of 54 weeks, because abusing is mediated by attitudes. Attitudes precede action. First, you have to have the attitude of disrespect, of aggression, before you take action. So it's not anger management. It's not anger management. Anger management is a tool that says, if you curate the environment for the abuser, if you're relaxed and we remove all of the things that he can throw at you, you'll be okay outside the environment. That's anger management. Remember that. Batteries intervention program is internal. The locus of control is internal. It doesn't matter if you lost your job, if the children are crying, if the soup is too salty, if the soup doesn't have enough salt, it really doesn't matter. The responsibility and accountability ultimately is with each one of us. So if you raise the hand, it's your hand, it's not the victim's hand. So it's a victim-centered intervention that includes individual counseling and parenting once a child. That takes that, usually a man, we also provide services for the woman, usually a man, and it teaches the man, it takes him back to his own childhood, once a child, so that he has it very present in his mind that whatever he felt when he was a child is what he is doing to the children in his life. Now, that is the only way we can address through the perpetrator the generation of violence.
Okay. I want the captain to speak to this issue. We just need to hang out for a few minutes after, so that if you have additional questions, they can come up. The question is, what is the firearm controversy in domestic violence? Can you talk a little about that?
But for me, there is no controversy. Weapons are in everybody's home. We live in the state of Texas. Everybody owns guns, right? When it comes to domestic violence, the one thing when you call us and we're going to be in the midst of your family, right? When you open up to us and say, this happened, we're always going to ask, do you have weapons in the house? It's as simple as that, right? It is your home as much as his home, right? And in the state of Texas, everything is on community property. If we believe the weapons are an issue, there's a safety issue, and it's obvious when it's domestic violence, we absolutely will take those weapons and put them in our property, right? There's number two, if you're on bond, I can't say every single time, right? But mostly on bonds, there's a weapons issue. You can't even have the weapons on the bonds. If you have a protective order, you can't have weapons based on protective orders. Every part of the system has a point with weapons, right from the get-go, from the first call. The only thing we ask, and this is information we're always going to ask, is he have weapons? You know, if he's a collector, we don't care. We're going to take his weapons. And there's a process to get your weapons back. Say he gets out, there's a weapon. We have weapons check if he's subject to a bond, if he's subject to a protective order, if he's been convicted of family violence, he's not getting his weapons back. It's just is. So we're going to be involved with the weapons. The only thing I would caution, and this is me being honest and open, right, is can he get weapons from, don't fall into a lull to believe he can't get a weapon from his mama, right, or his daddy, or will take care of him. Here you go, they took my weapons, can I have a weapon to protect myself? And they may appease him. So be very careful of believing all the weapons are gone. It's just the only thing I would caution. That's me being open and honest. Yeah, we took all his weapons, he's not going to get one. He can get a weapon. Most weapons that are found on criminal, and Joe will tell you, is that they're bought in the streets. They're not bought at Walmart. They're not bought at your local gun dealer. They buy them from friends or just illegally on the streets. So, but we intervene with the weapons. We will take them from the initial call to bonds, to protective orders. You just got to know they exist. We have parking spaces at every substations. If you want to bring it in, say we left and he's in jail. You want to get rid of him. You didn't say anything at the beginning. Call your nearest substation, your CRT officer. We have these safe spots. We either go pick it up at your house or we can meet you in the parking lot safely, open your trunk, and grab the weapon and put them in the proper place.
This is very important, you guys, because the combination of weapons and domestic violence in one house increases the chances of that victim being murdered by 500%. Okay, 58% of victims who are murdered with handguns. That's why we work very closely with groups like Moms Demand Action, because they're about gun sense laws. And, you know, we've got to recognize that link between domestic violence and weapons. This is very, very important. And it's also a safety concern for law enforcement. When they're going to go to that household, if you know there's guns in that household, you've got to speak up and say something, because the officers can then become the target, you know, of the usage of those weapons.
And usually be asked when you get the initial call, one of the questions they'll ask, are there any weapons in the house? So we're asking about weapons even when you're on the phone. So we want to know that, for our safety, for your safety, and then if we take it, we got to take it, we take them. The other part of lethality that is being very aware is strangulation, right? There's another strong correlation between strangulation and the lethality in domestic violence. It is almost, in other words, an attempt to murder. So when he puts his hands on your throat and he cuts off your breathing, and you know that's a big sign for us. That's the red flags. Weapons and strangulation, those are the two that we see. Those are the ones that they're hard for them to come back. Because next time it's going to take just a 30 more seconds and it's done. And so understand when he's done that once, he's going to need a whole lot of intervention in order to come back to normality for him. So just understand that.
When you talk about the firearms controversy, it's because we hear all the time, well, the government's trying to take our guns. The government's trying to take our weapons. Look, I'm a gun owner. I have been for several years, even before I became a DA. But I had to take a concealed handgun course. I had to learn how to clean my weapon. I had to learn how to fire it. I had to learn how to properly store it. Anybody, like the captain says, can go and get a gun on the street. You can go to a gun shop this weekend and buy an assault weapon and be 18 years old. Why anybody needs an assault weapon is beyond me. But I will tell you that in our office, since Uvalde, I've initiated a policy that if you use the gun to commit an offense, especially domestic violence, we're going to move to destroy that weapon because you shouldn't get that gun back. And so now we're doing it in every case following that motion.
Part of the controversy, Joe, is the fact that, yes, people think that every time that we talk about guns, we're coming after the Second Amendment. That is, it cannot be further from the truth. We're not interested in the Second Amendment. Go ahead and those people that own guns for pleasure, for hunting, keep your guns. We just want the guns that are used, that could potentially be used by people convicted of domestic violence to be removed from them. Those are the guns that we're interested in. So there will be a bill, and the laws have existed in the books since 2007. There is a law that mandates the judges to remove the guns from those who are culpable, found culpable of domestic violence. But not every judge is alert enough or remembers to ask for those guns when that judge is granting that protective order. So that is extremely important. About strangulation, 700% is the increase in lethality for that victim when she has been strangled. 700%.
This is very important, you guys, because, you know, a lot of people, they minimize. Oh, Joe was choking me last night, or, you know, Charlie was choking me. I'm sorry. There's a lot of Joes out there. And it's very important because it's very common. In Bexar County, right, Joe? There's lots of strangulation, you guys, in Bexar County. And this is very dangerous. Most victims who stay with somebody who has strangled them ends up dead. Okay? So when somebody tells you that somebody has put their hands on their throat trying to cut off oxygen to their brain, that person is in grave danger. Okay? That's a big red flag. You've got to get them to help. And you've got to tell them they're in grave danger. Okay? And the other thing I would like to encourage you to do is keep learning. Keep learning about this stuff. This is very important. October 6th and 7th, the Collaborative Commission on Domestic Violence is having our national conference. It's virtual and it's free. And everybody can join in. You just have to register at the ccdb.org website. ccdb.org, Collaborative Commission on Domestic Violence. Go there, register. I believe the registration link is up to date. And you can continue learning. It's a day-and-a-half conference, and we're bringing in speakers from all over the country to talk at that conference, and it's virtual. You can watch it at home and on your phone. And please join us and keep learning. We need to have an educated, informed citizenry, and that's who you are. And the other thing too, what Marta said about the judges, elections are coming up. And if you know people that are running for judge, you need to ask them, are you taking away weapons from convicted domestic violence offenders? Because we need you to use your power and your agency and your bench to keep our community safe.
Amen.
Okay?
passion up here, right? A lot of passion.